All right. I suppose I am live. It appears I am live. Let me check my levels. Are my levels on point? They appear to be. Realize my phone's not muted, so let's mute that bad boy. Okay. Happy Friday. 2:34 in the afternoon in New York. Eastern Daylight Savings. Hey, Ian. Thought I'd go back to the old Reddit. Look at some stuff. I was going to make a short about this. Actually, I probably still will make a short about this because no one but people who already, if you're in here, you know. If you know, you know. But I saw yesterday it dropped, and I have no horse in this race, right? Critical Role is campaign 4. They're using D&D. They're not using Draw Steel, and a bunch of people are in the not Draw Steel, Daggerheart, and a bunch of people in the Daggerheart subreddit. And in some of the other, like the RPG subreddit, some other places, kind of going, in my mind, a little bit nuts about this. I don't quite I'm going to say I don't understand it. I don't understand what Critical Role, the show, has to do with someone's enjoyment or not of Daggerheart. Like, if you read the game and there's an SRD, and so you can sample it and see it, and you like the game and you think your players will like it, or they'll like it, and you played it, like who cares if they are running it? Like, to me, it just seems very weird. Like, what does it matter? What does the game have to do with their thing? So yeah, sure. I'm really trying to look at what perspective. It's like, well, okay, from a, I don't know, audience. I don't even know. I don't even know what the perspective. What does it matter? Who cares? Obviously, they're doing something for business. Maybe it's not efficient for marketing of Daggerheart, but Daggerheart just came out, and people have posed various reasons. How comfortable is Brennan Lee Mulligan, who's the GM? Like, how comfortable are they with the system? That one seems kind of the weakest one, because you think like someone can learn a system. But have they already recorded stuff before they kind of knew that they were all ready to go? Do they have and they already said Matt Mercer's not running it, so does that mean they're kind of saving him to run a Daggerheart thing? Maybe. I wondered, did they still have relationships with WotC that they want to preserve? I don't know. There's all kinds of reasons, but to me, that's nothing to do with Daggerheart the game, and it's really weird because this is the kind of thing I think that I just feel like you get this thing, like, this is what people would expect of Wizards or D&D fans. Like, oh my gosh, like going crazy. Like if they had picked Daggerheart, this kind of response would be something I feel like they would think like D&D people would make. But it's they're all the same people. I don't know. It's weird, but it just seems really weird to me, and I don't get it. If you like Daggerheart, play Daggerheart. You like Draw Steel, play Draw Steel. Don't worry about these other things. It doesn't matter. That you've got the game in your hand. Because there are lots of great games that don't have any of this stuff that you could play. So it shouldn't be about, well, this or that 10 years down the line. It's like, who cares? Just play it. Just play. Play what you like. Play what you like. Who cares? Other stuff's just noise. Ian says people go crazy if they were using Draw Steel. Yeah, that would be a funny kind of crossover kind of thing, wouldn't it? Like, what if Colville's crew ran Daggerheart? I guess it would be an uneven kind of exchange. If the MCDM game ran Daggerheart and Critical Role ran Draw Steel. But I think it would be cool. I know they're friends. At least I remember back in the day, I think I remember hearing that, that some of the, like, Matt Mercer, like, Colville and Mercer know each other, and I think they worked on games together, him doing voices and Colville being like the art director or something on various video games. They know each other, friendly. I don't want to have like a one shot, because I don't think they're trying to compete with each other. I don't think there's any kind of Draw Steel Daggerheart animosity, other than whatever fans are fabricating because they came out in the same year, near the same time. Yeah, we need to do some. I wish the people would do more crossovers like that. Why the heck not? Anywho, so there's probably a short in there where I really just want to ask people, like, why are you sweating this stuff? You can't control it. Who cares? Have fun playing the game you have. Here's a homebrew. Hey, Tristan says Colville wrote the Critical Role comic book, or at least worked on them. Yeah, I remember that too. Yeah, I was even thinking prior to that, but yes, that's another good point. He also did that. So they think they have good. I assume they have a good relationship. Anyway, I don't know. My point is, like, look, that stuff with the show, it's it's noise. And I know some people were kind of like done with the show in D&D, thinking it's too long, too whatever, and they were kind of ready for it. So I get it if you say, hey, I don't feel like watching the show because it's D&D again, and I'm just kind of tired of D&D. I totally get that. But the weird thing is to me saying is I'm no longer enthusiastic to play the game because they're running D&D. That to me is like, who cares? Who cares? Is that really the biggest part? The biggest selling point of playing Daggerheart is the fact that you're playing the game that they're running the show. It's not like you're going to be able to play the show that they're running, since all that stuff can't come out until later on down the road. So, and why would you want to do that anyway? I don't know. I always want to do my own stories and things. I don't know. Play the game, have fun. I don't know why we're sweating what these companies are doing for some of the stuff. But I do get the maybe disappointment that they're sticking with D&D, but I don't get where that translates into some kind of enthusiasm. I get this thing like it's like the chef not eating his own food. It's like, no, it's not. No, it's not. They're not denying the game. They've already done what they already did, some kind of short campaign with the game. They're going to do more with the game. Okay, they're not somehow saying it's garbage or anything like that. And it's not, and maybe you could say that it's lack of faith in the product, maybe, but they're just hedging their bets, because that's probably a smart thing to do if you're a business person, is hedge your bets a bit and say, hey, we don't have a huge audience for Daggerheart yet. There's still a ginormous audience for D&D, and we'll be able to kind of wean them in over time. I mean, there's probably plenty of reasons, whether it works as a marketing shtick or not, who knows, but it's not the end of the world. It ain't the end of the world. It's not really the end of anything. Anyway, enough about that. So, so I was going to say, I guess, is that yesterday. So what happens is on Thursdays, it's my game night. I'm in Brooklyn. I travel into Manhattan, which takes me about, 30 to 40 minutes on the subway. So I generally will I'll pull up Reddit sometimes and just kind of, I guess it's a little bit I don't feel like I'm doom scrolling. I was looking for stuff of interest. And I have a kind of I'll look at a bunch of the different Reddit. So I'll read through Draw Steel stuff. And that's how I found that invisibility thing that I commented on the other day. I'll read through some things on Daggerheart. Those two specifically because they're new and I'm interested. And that's when I saw people on the Daggerheart subreddit going like, oh my gosh, they're doing this. And, I was like, what is going on? What is going on? Okay, but now we're back in the cozy confines of the OSR subreddit, which I'm guessing is not really going to touch upon that much. I'll just give it a refresh. I'm looking at the new tab as usual. If someone, now I think the way it's moderated, the auto moderator I don't think the YouTube thing will let you post links directly in a thread, but if you're on Discord, you can shoot me a message or blah, blah. Figure out a way to get me a message if you have something you want me to read. Other than that, shout out if you see something I'm missing. What's this called? Grafts in OSR. I don't remember graphs, but we take a look. It might be interesting. Okay, this is posted by, who is this? Vinny Sift? Yep, Vinny Sift. Read a lot of 3.5, D&D 3.5 books, and one of their favorite stuff was grafts. It's like prosthetics, but not just artificial body parts, but also living ones, like changing your eyes with the eyes of a beholder to shoot lasers from the eyes, using the legs of a mummified elven warrior to fight with more agility. That is kind of funny, because I just picture like the elven warrior is mummified. How much dexterity is left in some mummified legs? Oh, but I get kind of I don't know why that one gave me sort of an Adventure Time kind of thing, because I could totally see that as an Adventure Time episode. Let's see, or with more agility, or changing your tongue with a whip symbiont. Of course, many body horror elements, losing humanity, and aberrations are usually involved. However, I found surprisingly little of this kind of stuff for OSR. Probably the closest stuff is complete Vivimancer. So I wanted to ask the community if there's any support book or zine with this kind of objects or creatures. This would be interesting. I mean, I don't know of any. These are the things that I really like, but I don't know if I like them. I feel like a lot of stuff with body horror, kind of horror in general, and some stuff works a lot better in stories or in one shots or other things where it's just very contained. Like I like if you had an adventure where this was a thing, but it was kind of only a thing there, and it wasn't something that became part of the greater fabric of the world. And I think often when this stuff comes up in games, it's like so much a part of the setting that it's almost made ordinary. Like, oh, go there and go to the eye guy and get your new eyes or something. Almost like in Blade Runner when Deckard is tracking all the different pieces of the replicants. And they're like, where did you get those eyes? And where's the scale from the snake come from? And it's got all the manufacturing bits, and he's trying to track it back to the source. I like it if it's much more kind of weird. So I don't know that I even would really want or need a source book that's here to put this in my world so much as here in this one place, maybe this one person, maybe some kind of weird infernal chaotic machine or something, or maybe it's a spell that's out there kind of does it, as opposed to making something that's got like a whole bunch of rules around it. Make it more one-off, right? Like, oh, we killed a beholder and I've got this eye stalk and I heard there's a thing, and maybe you can make something of it, but you know what I mean? It, like, does it require, do you need a whole system of it because you're going to be using that much, or is something you really want to make weird? Because what I don't like is what I see happen, not necessarily in this specific thing, but I feel like in a lot of games, you had that moment where, oh, somebody lost their hand because they're using some kind of crit fumble or whatever. It's like, oh, they lost their hand, so I'm giving them a new hand, and I'm going to have this hand be even better than the hand they lost. And that kind of stuff I'm not down with. I don't like, either a player did something really cool, sacrificed their hand. Maybe they had to keep a door open to the last second, and it just was, and they crushed their hand and they lost it. Like, wow, that's really cool. And I get wanting to reward the character for that. But part of it, to me, their sacrifice is they sacrifice something. When you immediately undo that sacrifice, it's kind of nothing. And then it kind of sets up this expectation that, well, nothing really bad's going to happen. If I get myself sliced in half, I'm just going to get put back together. Not only will I get put back together, but my new thing will be better than my old thing. So I just don't really love it. But kind of as one-off, like weird, creepy, strange body horror kind of things, I'm down with it. But that doesn't necessitate a system. Do you need a whole system about that? Or can you just think about, okay, they've got a beholder stalk. How could this go right and how could it go wrong? Or what's the price for stitching this into your eye, right? Or replacing your eye with it. And that's kind of what the first comment says, which I didn't really, which is someone saying, or not someone, but Logan9 saying, for me, this would be a spot rule or adjudication situation I make up on the spot for that character only. And Vinny Sift replies, of course, that's always an option, but I like to see what other people before me have done and what cool ideas they had, specifically if those ideas fill a book. And I understand this too, but really, your ideas are as cool as theirs. Believe me. Frivolous Band 10 says, well, back in the olden days, there was, of course, the Hand of Vecna and the Eye of Vecna as official artifacts that required you to remove the corresponding body part in order to use the artifact, which spawned some story. I'm afraid I don't have anything current in regards to Ship of Theseus saying fantasies player characters. That kind of stuff seems more of a cyberpunk transhumanist sci-fi shtick. I mean, it doesn't have to be. These comments I also don't love, where someone's like blowing it off like, it's not really, get this out of, this is not really a fantasy. You just, they just want to saying like, oh, back in the day, you had these two artifacts that were literally this phenomenon, but you know what? It's not really fantasy. Take it to your cyberpunk transhuman sci-fi. Like, no, it could totally be very fantasy. Okay, and then let's see, is there anything else? Rizard KLD also mentions Hand of Vecna. Also mentions Dark Sun. Oh yeah, somebody who was it in the Discord said that there's Dark Suns coming. Maybe someone will post about it. They didn't give me a link, so I don't know where to go about it. Is there an announcement kind of thing? But I guess since, let me just see. If I just type Dark Sun, no. Oh, this is it. Wargamer.com's got a thing. Okay, so, all right, so there's nothing more with that. So what I will do, since I pulled this up different, I'll shoot this over. So we did hear about, and I'd forgotten about this, but now I know. Oh wait, Tristan says, before I get into Dark Sun, Tristan says, these things always seem like the idea is fun and cool, but in practice kind of begin to fall apart in the long run. Yeah, I think it either becomes something where it just becomes another like equipment sort of thing. Oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that to myself. And yeah, I just would never want it to feel ordinary. I would never want it to feel humdrum. I'd never want it to feel like you could just do it with no kind of weird consequence. So if you're putting a beholder stalk on your eye, it's not just, oh, look, now I get a laser twice a day or whatever it is. Like, no, I would want to have real consequences and stuff. And I don't know. I mean, sure, I could probably jam together something to make a system surrounding it. Maybe use the hit dice of the creature and whatever else. But really, in the amount of times it would come up and the sort of even if it came up a bunch, it would be over a long, that would be assuming there's a lot of play going on. It wouldn't be something that's coming up often. I would just feel like, you know what, I'll just figure that out. Handcrafted to be as interesting, as fair, as kind of as tempting maybe, but dangerous, and not just come up with let me roll these dice to see what happens, or just pay an XP cost or pay a GP cost or both, something like that. All right, so this is at wargamer.com. I will post this about Dark Sun, since Dark Sun is back, ? Okay, so this is what Wargamer has to say. New D&D playtest suggests a comeback for controversial Dark Sun setting. Dungeons & Dragons drops an apocalyptic subclasses playtest, and it could herald the return of a beloved but controversial setting. Dungeons & Dragons is at it again with the new subclasses dropping a fresh playtest on the 21st. The theme is apocalyptic, and the gritty nature of these subclasses has everyone speculating that a Dark Sun remaster is on the horizon. If it is, these initial subclasses look very promising. The new D&D playtest features some of the most exciting design choices we've seen from Wizards of the Coast all year. And this is, so as you just mentioned, this is written by Molly Russell and published on wargamer.com. Dark Sun debuted in D&D's second edition, and it introduced a grimdark post-apocalyptic spin on the game's heroic fantasy stories. Genocide and environmental destruction have rendered most of the world of Athas a barren wasteland. Sorcerer kings rule city-states where slavery is abundant. These casual depictions of slavery, combined with plenty of racial stereotypes, make Dark Sun a setting that D&D has been reluctant to return to. Back in 2023, former executive producer Kyle Brink said that, quote, the Dark Sun setting is problematic in a lot of ways, and that's the main reason we haven't come back to it. 2 years have passed, and Brink is no longer working for Wizards of the Coast. Perhaps then we're finally going to see Dark Sun return. The naming conventions in this latest playtest certainly seem to say it's so. All right, so Circle of Preservation. First, there's the Circle of Preservation druid who, quote, work tirelessly to conserve natural resources and restore places once ruined by greed and exploitation, unquote. Their signature feature is a bonus action that lets them create a 15-foot cube that can be moved around the field or on future terms, a bit like Moonbeam. At first, the Spotlight of Vitality offers creatures that end their turn inside at one of two benefits. They gain. All right, I don't care about the details because I'm not going to be playing this. So basically, okay, so we have this one Circle of Preservation Druid is one class. Gladiators, let's see, they specialize in bloodthirsty arena fighting. This manifests as the Brutality feature, which lets you use additional weapon masteries when making attacks. Okay, I'm going to just skip the rest of it. Okay. Let's see, they can use their charisma. I think that makes sense. Another one is Defiled Sorcery. Dark Sun's environmental problems are partly down to magic users who drain vitality from their surroundings. Bear that in mind when you read this description of the Defiled Sorcerer. Quote, your innate power siphons life essence from the surrounding world. You draw power from the corruption of life itself, draining vitality to fuel destructive magic. Okay. And the author of the article says, that's a badass introduction, but we actually think this subclass is the weakest of the bunch. Aw. Its features are overcomplicated, and they are far too resource-hungry to be exciting. Okay. And then you can also get a Sorcerer King Patron if you're a Warlock. Now, that's obviously, if you have a Sorcerer King Patron, that sounds very much Dark Sun. So I can see how people are reading between the lines. Doesn't seem to be all that subtle that maybe Dark Sun's making a return. I guess the interesting thing for this is if you were someone who loved Dark Sun, I played it just a super little bit in a play-by-post Dark Sun game. And sorry, I'm looking at my window because I think I might need to close it for a bit because there's somebody mowing outside and it is driving me nuts. Just that pitch. It's like the whine of a dentist's drill. I liked Dark Sun, but I loved it. So I think when maybe is a trap here, and we'll see whether they fall into it or not, or how they deal with it, is, yeah, there are some things, if you're going to treat slavery as just kind of this everyday thing, look, a lot of grognardy types will be like, yeah, I see, slavery, it's part of the setting, you got to live with it. I think I prefer if slavery is just, this is bad. And the people who live with it know that it's bad, and either you're kind of corrupted by dealing with it, or you fight against it. That's me. That's how I like to play kind of my worlds. I don't have just kind of like, oh, slavery is just kind of a thing. That, for me, doesn't exist. And I don't even remember how Dark Sun treats it, but it is endemic in that world. But whatever other things you have going on, I'm sure people have made a list. I'm not going to look it up, but either you fix those things you change them to, and as a corporation working on the stuff, right? They don't always do they try to do what they think is right, and sometimes they succeed and very often they fail. Whatever they do, it's probably going to make angry the people who are the Dark Sun hardcore, because those Dark Sun hardcore people are probably going to be mad at some level if this thing is anything but a 1-to-1 replication of Dark Sun with 5e's rules. So I'm assuming it's not going to be that. Regardless of anything else, they're probably going to do some changes, maybe some smaller than others or larger than others. It's not going to be that. So you're not going to win. It's going to be hard to win that crowd. And the crowd who's Dark Sun, remember, coming from 2nd edition, maybe they played in other editions, they're probably in the grognardy camps. They're probably less inclined to be happy with anything Wizards does anyway, and which I can understand because it's Wizards. And Wizards just isn't in a good place right now, I think, in terms of their name, their recognition is kind of negative, right? I think in most communities. So that's a hard sell. And then if you're kind of like, oh, this seems interesting, and then they have this problematic stuff in there with the people who are more 5e folks, it's probably going to hit them the wrong way. So to me, it almost feels a little bit like a lose-lose situation. Maybe you'll get a few people who are like, yeah, Dark Sun, but I feel more of it's going to be like, oh, look. I mean, you look at some of the other things they put out, and you see the people who are really into those settings who'll just start the takedowns of, oh, but they didn't do this, they didn't do that, and they did that. Like they're writing drafts of that copy already. Okay, that's already coming, and it doesn't really matter, I think, what they do. Even maybe if it were perfect, they'd probably still find some fault. But since it's not going to be perfect, since there are some stuff that I imagine they're going to change, regardless of what it is, they're going to run afoul of those folks. And then the other folks, is it going to be enough? Like, do people want Dark Sun now? And I'm curious how they're going to navigate that, if they do, or is this just a little bit of maybe they just want to see what the reception is with this just play test, because it could disappear tomorrow and nobody would be the wiser. I'm curious. Let's see. Brian says Eberron has a system for creature symbiote items. Oh, I didn't even realize that Eberron. This is going back to the thing on adding weird attachments, body horror stuff. Thanks, Brian. And then Ian says a Dark Sun re-release has a lot of anti-capitalist, anti-colonialist potential. It's always interesting, right? Because a lot of the folks who are really grognard now are not the kind of people who are into anti-capitalist and anti-colonialist potential. I mean, obviously, I'm painting with a broad brush because I'm in that same boat and I don't have those problems. I know a lot of other people don't also, but some of the most vocal folks do seem to have it. But it's always weird when it's like they're into it. It's like Star Trek, like people getting mad, like, oh, I can't believe Star Trek's gone woke. Like Star Trek's always been woke. Like where are you coming from? Like when Star Trek, the original series, came out, it was probably the most woke show ever in the history of TV at the time. But somehow that flew under your radar. But now if they're doing something, now it's like horrible. Like it doesn't make sense. And I think that's probably going to come out a bunch of stuff too, where people who are looking at it with fresh eyes and maybe the nostalgia not quite as strong because Wizards is doing it, are all of a sudden going to pull out all the stuff that's they see as bad or woke. It just seems to me it'll be a mess. And I would love if they went more. I really liked in 2nd edition where you could have this variety of settings that could touch on different things. And if you wanted to play in kind of a post-apocalyptic grimdark fantasy, as this author called it, you could do that. And if you wanted to get into more domain stuff, or at least work that, and you had Birthright, and if you wanted, Eberron, I don't know if Eberron came out in 2nd or not, but or you had Al-Qadim, and you had Oriental Adventures, which is a horrible name now, but I had all these different things, so you could really kind of now you just got Forgotten Realms. And so I would like if they did more, let's multiverse it out a bit. And I know that Spelljammer, or whatever they did did call it Spelljammer, right? They didn't change the name. Gives you opportunities to move between the spheres and whatever. You can always have things in different dimensions and whatever, but I think that'd be good. I'm sure it actually, from a corporate standpoint, it's probably bad. You want everybody on Forgotten Realms, I think, so that you keep doing that and not splinter your player base in these different settings. I'm sure there's a bit about that. But I kind of like it. So part of me is like, I do hope they do more things like that. I don't know that I wouldn't prefer if they just came up with something new. Like, what is we're in 2025. What is the stuff that's around now? Because, Dark Sun was a response to stuff happening in that moment, right? Trying to address things from that moment or whatever. And like now we're way later. We're not in an identical moment, so it probably won't hit the same regardless. I don't know. Tristan says, I think they should just recreate or just create a new original setting. Yeah, I think so too. Or just do it. I mean, the Forgotten Realms isn't even all of the planet that they're on. Like where are the other, we just think of Forgotten Realms and kind of the Sword Coast in that area. Like there's got to be, I mean, have they even mapped the entire planet, let alone going to other things? I don't know. I know they've got wherever, right, where Chult is. I guess that's another kind of continental area. But yeah, I come up with some new stuff. Finishing off some Island Punch Spindrift for the working man. All right, but we got that cleared. So now we're back here. I'm kind of curious it's not first in the OSR thing, but I guess because it's 5e, right? It's not top of mind here. All right, let's see. Let's see what we got. What text would you put on the player-facing side of a GM screen? That's kind of not a bad idea, except that your screen generally isn't in a good position for players to see it. Depending where you're sitting, you might see one panel. So I'm not sure. But it would be not a bad thing to have some text up there, actually. Okay, here's one that might be interesting. This was posted by, who is this? Papinko, right? Did I get that right? Yeah, Pepperink0. How can I make monsters fun? One of the big draws of OSR games for me is the fantasy of delving into the dangerous confines of ancient tombs and dungeons. BX derivatives give a great framework for playing this fantasy out at the table. However, there's one pillar of this time-honored fantasy trope which I, as a GM, just can't seem to capture. When it comes to fighting a lone bestial monster, I feel the game very quickly gets reduced to its most basic rules and gameplay quickly becomes static. With groups of intelligent humanoids, combat feels dynamic and tactical, but when it's a group of 7 adventurers fighting a single beast with instincts only one level above that of an animal, and at most a couple of actions around, it can feel like fighting a punching bag armed with a high-caliber rifle. I'd love to hear people's suggestions on how to better recreate the fantasy of these heroic battles against dangerous monsters on the tabletop. Well, I know there's a couple of things going on here, right? I don't think that this is actually that much of a... Here's maybe my hot take. If you go back and look at a lot of sword and sorcery and fiction stuff, you don't tend to find this idea of the group taking on one monster. I mean, it's usually what shows up in the cover of books and things like 10,000 BC, and you see this ginormous mammoth and the 7 hunters with their spears around it. Or, on D&D books, they'll do that, but whatever. But if you think of a lot of times, it's not often the case. I mean, in Fellowship of the Ring, when they're fighting the troll in Moria, it's not just the troll. There's orcs. There is the troll, which is the highlight of that thing, but there's all kinds of stuff going on. It's not just the 7 of them gathered around the troll. And I think maybe at the end of that fight, it kind of gets there, and they really just do kind of take care of it. But then also you get the book as a narrative introduces that sort of jump scare, kind of not really a jump scare, but that scare of, Frodo being mortally wounded. Right? So they have this way of kind of counterbalancing, but you don't actually see this a lot. And usually that's kind of how that's how hunters worked. That was one of the benefits of humans or pack animals and things using that, is that you were able to, how do you take down this big thing? Is you don't do it by yourself. You get a bunch of people and do it. And that's kind of the safest way to do that. So I almost think that it gets really overstated in these games, this idea of having the one thing that everyone's taking on. Right. And maybe we shouldn't, as a community, as GMs, we shouldn't plan so much of our encounters around that. But for some reason, it's a big draw. I get it. I like to do it too. Like, oh my gosh, we're going to have this one dragon and then we're going to be all fighting the one dragon. But how often in games not outside of games, how often do you run across that? Usually, it's like St. George and the Dragon. It's one guy, one monster, Dragon Slayer, one guy, one monster. I mean, obviously he's got help from even at the end, right? I'm spoiling Dragon Slayer, I guess 1981. So sorry if you haven't seen it, but usually at every point, it's pretty much one guy versus one monster, one person. But we're going to put that aside, right? Because people are doing this. People do it all the time. So I don't want to just say, like, be the person that says you're doing it wrong. Don't have one person, one monster, even though that might actually be the best thing, is adding some other things to the mix. Okay. But let's just assume that you don't want to do that. It's impossible. And, in any way, we should try to accommodate different things. I think keeping in mind that in something like BX, you do not have opportunity attacks, and you don't have anything that can stop you from moving. Nothing can stop you. Unless you literally can't find a way from here to there or there to here, nothing can prevent you from moving other than, bodily positioning is kind of what I mean, right? Someone can bodily position themselves so that you can't get to a spot on the field, but barring that, they can't prevent you from moving around. So use that movement. If you're fighting, let's say, some giant, I don't know, cave tiger, hey, Croco, cave tiger, have that thing jump around, have it leap over people's heads, have it pounce on the wizard in the back who's 20 feet away, who thought like, oh, I'm safe back here. No, you're not, because that guy, because you're outside, or maybe you're in a cavern with high ceilings, and it just makes this ginormous leap and just bounds right over and gets at you. Have the hippogriff grab somebody and fly up into the sky with them. Have them move around. Have them reposition. Have the dragon stay in the air. Dragons always in the. You never notice how dragons mostly always come down to the ground and start and stay there, which makes it really easy to get surrounded and taken down. Like that, stay in the air. Like they should, make the party force the dragon somehow to get on the ground or take maybe more damage so it can't fly or something, right? Use all the things that you'd be using the environment, all the things that I would tell to a party. Hey, we're getting stuck. We're kind of sitting there in a stale spot. What do we do? The monsters should be doing the same thing. And oftentimes they have things. There's no reason to sit there. Back up. I once ran. It wasn't a one-on-one encounter, but I had these little guys, kind of kobold-like, and the party was trying to investigate these caves where these kobold-like things were being. And there was kind of a dungeon in the cave, so it wasn't all natural, but it kind of started off as a cavern, and then it got into worked tunnels and things. Well, these little guys, they couldn't stand up to the party, even at, I don't know, second level, wherever the party was. They were weak like that. But what they could do was continually harry the party. So the party would end up getting in the mix with something else, and then they'd get pelted from the rear from these kobold type things who knew where all the dangers were because they lived there, and they're just always kind of creeping around and trying to get the party in these and they ended up like being enough of a pain in the butt where the party got into trouble because they were end up in this kind of two-front war, and they never wanted to follow the kobold because the kobolds would keep, when they would advance, the kobolds would stay back. So they were using slings or something like that, and they just keep backing up into their tunnels and kind of scattering right away. And the party never got a handle on that. And then when they try to turn around and deal with something else, then they'd come back from behind again. And that was kind of their tactic. They were weak on their own, kind of like Tucker's kobolds. Well, I wasn't doing some of the stuff the Tucker's kobolds were doing, but again, just kind of, hey, look, you're small, like looking at your creatures, like what are they? Okay, this guy is big and bulky, whatever. How can he use that bulk to his advantage? These guys are small, they're wily. How can they use that to their advantage? I don't even really worry about the intelligence things. I think that gets overplayed a lot. Like people act with these things like animals are just the stupidest things on the planet, but they're not. Like, oh, this thing's barely smarter than an animal. Like animals, granted, it's not the same intelligence that we have, but they are clever in their own right, as we see all the time. So just play them. They're not. If you're asking them to read a nuclear submarine handbook, then sure, maybe it can't do that. Fine, it can't cast a spell. Unless it has some kind of ability, but everything else, especially in terms of just mobility and whatever, like they're using all this stuff. Predators are predators for a reason. They succeed for a reason. They survive for a reason. And humans were often in our history prior to tools part of that prey chain. So it's not like humans were somehow, oh, look, I'm a human, I'm smart, so I automatically don't get killed by cougars or bears or lions or whatever. It's like, no, even with all our stuff, you go to places where those animals are around and they take down people, right? And even non-predators do, like hippos and other things. They'll take down people. So I think you underplay them when you start to say like, well, they're too stupid to do this. It's like, yeah, they're different. All right. Croco says they like to have lone monsters stalk the party, sometimes just out of light range. So the party either has to deal with it or keep a looming threat. I like that. Tristan says, I think it's important to remember that a lot of the time these monsters are essentially apex predators with their own innate tactics and fighting habits. I agree. Tristan also says, no predator would just stand there and go toe-to-toe with something capable of hurting them. Yeah, they don't. They try to pick off the weak, right? That's what you see in all the nature shows where the wildebeest who's older and has a limp, and that's the one that the lions are taking down. They don't, this weird thing like, well, it's an animal, so it's going to fight the fighter. It's like, no, the animal's not dumb. If they see some kind of guy that looks in a metal shell, or they see some guy in a robe, they know what's easy and what's difficult. And Croco says, yeah, something like an ogre is okay in a normal fight, even for a level 1 party, but if the ogre is on a cliff edge and throws boulders down, then it gets more threatening, which is something that ogres should do. Right? Ogres should be using that. They shouldn't be standing around. I mean, look, wandering creatures happen, and sometimes the ogre's going to get lunch or go to the grocery store, and they get ambushed by a party, and they got to deal with it. But they know, the ogre knows that unless they seriously overpower this particular group, that sitting there in an open plain and just sitting there and getting their health whittled down is not a winning tactic. So they should act accordingly, which is probably like, let me get the heck out of here, or get to high ground, or get a boulder, or get to a cave, or get somewhere else where I can put my back against the wall, and then I can use my ogreish strength to its best and not get taken apart here in an open space. So do that. Something like that. And people love to point out the monsters know what they're doing, which I still haven't read. I'm sure it's a good book, but I just always feel like, do you need a book to tell you these things? I guess people do and they like them, but I also wonder about, man, I feel like a lot of stuff's just self-explanatory. Just read, especially with the books that give you some kind of description of the monster, or if it's a monster from fables and fairy tales and mythology, just read what it's like, because that generally will give you the idea of what to do to use them. The thing that can fly and grab things and do things like that should probably be flying and grabbing things. The thing that's really strong and can throw stuff should probably be really strong stuff and throwing things, right? Just not saying not to get the book, and I'm not saying it's a bad book or anything like that, but I'm just saying that, like, part of me thinks like just a little bit of imagination, a little bit of almost common sense of what does this monster do? Oh, okay, like just do that. And watch some nature shows. Watch those shows where they show predators taking down prey and kind of see the sort of stuff that they do, and then, do those things. Do those things. Okay. But I think it's a good question. It's a good question. Tristan says that their son has those books and read them when he was learning to DM because he didn't want his voice. Yep. Look, they have a use. I'm not trying to say they're terrible books. I haven't read them. People are really popular. Just part of me thinks it's kind of one of those things that I almost wish it's sort of like that teach a man to fish kind of thing. Like, I would rather somebody taught themselves how to fish than read a book that, that's not even a good analogy. Basically, and I'm not even saying these books don't do that, because I don't know. But rather than going and having to buy the book with specific tactics for each creature, I'd rather you develop the practice to look at creatures and kind of figure out how you should use them, or at least some ideas, because it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't even have to be what the creature should do. Just get an idea how to use the creature from kind of looking at their abilities, which I think in the long term is a better practice, because you're not always going to have a creature from the book. Croco says, had a party fight an ogre mage with minions recently. That was fun because it can gaseous form around, turn invisible to attack the back line, a cone of cold the front line, or charm the cleric. Fun times. Yeah. I mean, it definitely helps when you have more actions. And that was the thing, that when you get into modern D&D, where that action economy becomes so important, and you run into all these effects that the party can drop on you that take away actions. This is a big thing in 4E, maybe even 3rd edition too, is when you start adding all these status effects. You're playing something like BX, you have very limited things. Obviously, when you get up to higher levels, you start to be able to slow, and maybe what do you call, like hold person, hold monster. You get some things, but especially at the beginning, you don't have anything other than, say, sleep or charm, which doesn't work. Neither one works on some stuff, and it's kind of dicey. But you only get one of them usually in a day, right? So you're only going to get that kind of once or twice. You could very easily have monsters that don't have a lot going on who can still be very compelling. I mean, just having someone that does like 3 attacks in a round, 2 claws and a bite, can be a horrific time for a party. I I had ran a TPK where it was, I think it was a troglodyte, but I kind of reskinned it a little bit, but it had kind of claw bite. And it was down to the wire whether they were going to be able to kill it before it claw bite. And because it could spread those around amongst different opponents and they were all in melee, if they got hit, they were going to go out. Unless they hit first, they could take it out. And they ended up taking it out first, but it had nothing special to it. Later on, it helps when you have magic stuff, and and that's when the game starts to want to add in things like magic resistance and things like that on top of better saves, so that you can't debilitate the monster and just rock and roll on it. So in OSR, we're a little bit insulated from the kind of stuff like in 5e. It becomes worse when they're like, oh, you've got this status on you, this status, and unless you have legendary saves, which players hate, I guess, or these other things, you just kind of get bogged down. I remember that happened to me with a dragon I was running. I think it might have been 4e, and like I landed to do something and I wanted to fly again. And I couldn't because they just kept hamming me down. You just oh no, but I did this to you, so you can't move and all this stuff. And I was like, oh my gosh, like it made it really hard for me to play the monster to its but now props to the party for doing all this stuff, but it can be a little bit overboard too. It's like you want you want the and that's where you have to kind of let go, I guess, as a GM. Like, no, but I want the dragon to be doing all this stuff. But like, well, I wasn't going to say all of a sudden no, this other stuff. So I just had to eat it there when my dragon got pounded into the dirt. And I was like, okay, well, next time I'll know better. I won't have it land or do this thing I want to do, because then they just pummel it. But the BX and those don't tend to have that problem, at least not until late. Because they don't have tons of status effects. Croco says they like to let combatants move around freely, makes battles more dynamic on both sides. Well, I mean, the rules, it obviously depends what you're playing, but BX, they don't have, other than the fact that you can only move, what is it, a half or a third of your movement, because otherwise, without turning your back, that kind of defensive movement, you can absolutely move around. And I try to remind players of that if I'm running something like BX all the time. Like, you can move around, and they can too, and your opponents can too. They're not stuck there. Because you're in contact doesn't mean you have to end the round in contact, doesn't mean they have to end the round in contact with you. And if you want to prevent your back line from getting thwacked, you can't just stand there and say, oh, I have some sort of gravity and the bad guy's just going to stick with me. Nope. You're going to have to make it so they can't get around you. Put them in a corner, or make sure there's no hole in your defense, and obviously make sure that you're not fighting a cave tiger or something that can cave lion that can jump over everybody or whatever, or fly over or anything like that. You gotta do that, because there's nothing sticky about it, which can be it can be a hard thing for folks who are used to more modern games, and also video games, because a lot of MMOs and things have that. Oh, I've got, I used to find these discussions, people are like, but I have the aggro. It's like, man, there's no aggro in this game. There's no aggro at all. You cannot aggro something. You cannot hold its aggro. That does not exist. So get that out of your mind, that somehow if you hit it or you do something, suddenly you've got aggro. And I am not a fan of mechanics that try to backport those concepts into like OSR style D&D. Do not want. Croco says, fireballing a troll might make it beeline for the magic user if it doesn't fail morale first. I mean, look, the troll might beeline for the magic user anyway, just because it knows that fireball could be on the menu, and fireball's not that high a level spell. So you don't have to look like you're, Merlin to be able to shoot a fireball. Schmendrick can shoot a fireball. So there's a good reason for the troll to try to get rid of the magic user early and not even tempt the fireball to come out. Brian Smith says, hold my beer, hold my aggro. Yep, exactly. All right, let's see what else we got going on. Do we all know about Weird Science? I do not know. Colossal Discovery. Blog roll. Anything good in the blog roll? Let's see. Oh, these are people. Okay, rules for fatigue. That might be good. Oh yeah, I have a bunch of my own. If you haven't checked out, you can go. If you go to the Patreon, you should probably, every once in a while, is it a bad thing if I just pimp the fact that I have a Patreon? If you go to the Patreon, I have a whole collection of RPG a day 2025. I'll post a link to it. And it's also on the forums where you can also see Krako's amazing tables. Hey, Tunkatod, it has been a while. Welcome back to the stream. Let me see. I'll put my RPG a day archive. I'll call it 2025. I'm pretty happy with what I've done. It's been, I'll tell you what though. I do find it, I don't want to say difficult. It definitely absorbs some of my gaming energy. Here we go. And then on I got a forums link also. And not only that, so if you go to the forums, you'll see that Krako's posted a bunch of stuff too. I also put it on itch. Let me see if I can find the link to that. Let's see. Okay, let me see. I can get it here. Here it is. And then here it is on itch. Oops. And basically everything goes, all those things will funnel to the blog for the long entries. Krako says some days are harder than others. Yeah, I've tried to be more expansive, and I feel good about my entries, but yeah, there's definitely some of them where I've struggled a little bit. I've also gone off the reservation a little bit with some of them. Like I've just been using that first level of prompts rather than the tables, the kind of rolling parts they have below in the other section. But I mean, look, I feel really good. I mean, we're only got 8 days or 9 days left. I mean, we're on day 22 and I'm still hanging in there. So I feel good. I feel very good about that. And I even had a couple of times where I've had to fall behind. I didn't have to, but it was just hard to staying with it because I was away or something else was happening, and was able to get back to it. So I feel good about that. All right, so let's read what's going on here. Weaving Stories. I'll post this link to it. This is called Rules for Fatigue in Old School RPGs. Let me just write this in. Rules for Fatigue. I'll just put that. I think that's good enough. It's in the chat if you want to follow along. That's interesting. It's making things bigger, but it's not increasing the space. Okay. I am interested. So this is posted. Yeah, Weaving Stories blog. I don't have a specific author. Posted from August 17th. Rules for Fatigue in Old School RPGs. I am interested in the theme of fatigue in fantasy adventuring, that there are limits to perseverance, to maintaining constant vigilance. In general, I'm interested in simple rules that can bring the characters more to life and make them more than perfect automatons. In particular, given my chronic fatigue syndrome, I'm interested in tiredness. Here are some rules. Here's a quote, the most desirable quality in a soldier is constancy in the support of fatigue. Valor is only secondary. And that's from Napoleon. So first up, fatigue. Every character has a fatigue penalty. It starts at 0 and can increase to -3. If your fatigue would increase beyond -3, you fall unconscious for 1d6 turns. Some exceptional characters can be tougher by having 1 or even 2 extra 0 fatigue boxes to tick off before they start feeling the effects. Effects of fatigue. Fatigue affects sustained concentration and alertness when no immediate danger threatens. For example, studying complex tomes, watching for minute signs of danger, reflexes. It's easy to drift off and lose the thread. Any roles that come under those categories receive the fatigue penalty, and some categories may require a roll that otherwise wouldn't. For example, if your fatigue is severe, you may need to save to stay awake if you are waiting with nothing to do. I think that's a cool example. Once danger arrives, adrenaline kicks in and drives away tiredness. Apply the penalty to the initiative roll if you use individual initiative, but not to anything else in combat. Causes of fatigue. When exploring a dungeon, we roll for fatigue every time we make a wandering monster check, normally every 2 turns. They use something called the Encounter Stew system by Arnold K, which maybe I'm not sure I'm familiar with that, but we can look at that maybe afterwards. Okay, so they just toss these extra dice into the pot along with the dice for torches and spell durations. I color code my dice to tell them apart. We roll. 1 white encumbrance d6 plus 1 die for each character who is overburdened and 1 die for each character wearing heavy armor. For every 1 rolled, the character takes a -1 fatigue. Assign each fatigue to a different character if possible, and assign first to the most encumbered characters. Brian says the fatigue thing to me suffers when you're thinking about a party, you kind of have a majority fatigue. Like you don't keep going and going if most of your party is exhausted. And Krakow says, it feels overly punishing. Well, let me get to the end. So then we can probably discuss a little bit of fatigue in general. Because I think it is a useful thing to have. I kind of like what they're doing here, partly, but I don't know, I kind of want to get more into it. So basically, every 2 turns, which may be more. I mean, I kind of like the BX thing of you take a rest at every hour. I would probably use that over this for doing that, but they have this whole dice thing they're using, so it kind of fits in when they're rolling dice. Let's see. And this also means that, remember, that you have to roll a 1, I think. So there's not so remember, so for each one of those dice, it's only a 1 in 6 chance it's going to trigger. So keep that in mind for the odds part of it. Persistent, uncomfortable, or difficult conditions such as stifling heat, wading through deep water, deafening racket, add additional encumbrance d6s to the pool. 1 white sentry d4 for every character on sentry. For every 1 rolled, a character on sentry takes a fatigue. Assign each fatigue to a different character if possible. If the party are on full alert, skip this roll and just assign -1 fatigue to a character. Outside dungeon exploration, characters also sustain fatigue when keeping watch through the night and when doing a forced march, travel further than is normally possible in a day. Sentry duty. In general, when GMing, I provide descriptions and the players describe what they do, and through this, the players can discover treasure, monsters, traps, etc. However, what if the clues to these things are subtle? A depression in the ground due to a pit trap, a crack in a corridor wall that hints of a secret passage beyond, ichor dripping from the fangs of a giant spider lurking above. When the players are exploring a dangerous environment, one or more characters are on sentry. When the GM needs to know if the characters have spotted something subtle, all sentries roll. A successful roll reveals these subtle clues, but it's still up to the players to use their normal interactions to see what the clues mean. If 4 or more characters on sentry, then the party is on full alert and they automatically notice these clues without needing to roll. Characters recover 1 fatigue when they get a night's sleep, or 2 fatigue if they have a fire, implying also cooked food, or are sleeping in a proper bed in a house. Commentary. Being vigilant via the sentry roll or keeping watch through the night, pushing your character's endurance by burdening yourself or doing a forced march, has a cost in fatigue. This both gives us interesting choices. How dangerous do we think this is? Who do we need to prioritize keeping well rested? And also makes the characters more human. The difficulty of recovering fatigue while sleeping rough and keeping watch makes the comforts of civilization and safety more palpable. Okay, Krakow says, I guess it's not that influential, but it feels easily forgotten minutia. Well, I think this particular GM, seeing that they said that they suffer from chronic fatigue system, is probably not going to forget it. And I think what they've done is make it like it is kind of a thing with the game, right? That this is a major factor. And it definitely will have an interesting way of how you're doing things if you have this fatigue. And I like how they're integrating it in a bunch of different ways, that it affects what you can see. Like what he's doing is, or they, I don't know if it's he, what they are doing is taking their own experience with this thing that they suffer through and explaining in a way, well, this is how it affects me, how fatigue can really affect you. You may not think about it because maybe you don't get fatigued very much, but I do. And so I can tell you that these are the things it affects. And we're going to incorporate that in the game. So that's going to be important that your sentries are well, like all this kind of stuff, and you'll start getting fatigue. Now, notice that they're not using it in combat other than initiative. So you'll be slow to get kind of ramped up in initiative, but other than that, it's like you're at your full thing. So they're not trying to take away the fact that you're, oh my gosh, I'm going to die now. That because I've got a couple of fatigue. Like, no, well, I mean, you could die if it's a trap. You might very well die because that's kind of part of what they're saying is, look, you miss a little detail, which is like seeing the pressure plate on the floor. So then you fall into the pit trap and you do die. But in terms of fighting things, you've still got that going for you. So I think it's kind of a neat system. I mean, I kind of like hey, if you're able to rest every hour, as you're supposed to do in kind of BX, and I think in OD&D also, but you're supposed to, in an hour of dungeon delving of 6 turns, 1 is supposed to be a rest turn because it is fatiguing. But a lot of folks don't play that. What I ended up doing in Troop was saying you get strain in my game there is no fatigue because it's all one currency, which is strain. You don't want strain. To get rid of your strain, you could take these little rests, which essentially is that kind of once an hour you can take a turn to rest. What I tried to do is take that thing of resting once every hour, and instead of making it a GM thing where I'm penalizing you for taking it, you're going to want to take it when you start picking up strain. And because strain affects all your dice, to me it has a similar effect of, well, I want to look at something where I'm rolling dice. I would have had 2 dice to roll, but I'm strained, so now I'm only rolling 1, which impacts my ability to see stuff. So that's kind of how I dealt with it. But this is another good way, an interesting way to do it that I think works if you want to make this a factor. It is going to slow things down in the sense it's going to make your party move more carefully. You're going to have to take more rests or do things because to offset that fatigue. You can get fatigue at different times. It may cut short your dungeon adventures because you're just picking up more fatigue you can get rid of, because you can only get rid of fatigue for night's rests. So you can't get rid of fatigue by taking that 10-minute rest at the bottom of an hour. Doesn't get rid of any fatigue. So you can only get rid of it by resting for a night, which means that there's a good chance that your dungeon delving expeditions are going to be shorter than they might otherwise be, but that's just that's just the rhythm of the game. But it definitely adds another ground. I mean, if you want you're getting really grounded with the stuff, that is a way to do it, because in a lot of OSR play, there isn't much done with fatigue. Like in BX, I think they say something like, well, if you don't rest, you get a -1 or -2 to some rolls. But I think a lot of people forget to do that. They forget to ensure that people are resting. So that gets lost. But if you're having something like this where you're physically rolling dice and you're using this kind of dice bag kind of deal where your colors and you're apt to, it's because you've kind of put it forward in all your procedures, you're apt to not forget so much. Brian says, could give a ranger or druid fatigue in town. Haha. I mean, you could. I mean, you can have a lot of fun with, oh, hey, if you're in the wilderness, then the ranger can take double the fatigue or something. Instead of getting a tick mark every 1 fatigue, they get 2. You can. The one nice thing with stuff is you can really have fun with the different currencies. I went with simplifying down to kind of 1 currency, but that 1 currency counts for a lot, because in my mind, however you want to role play what strain is, whether it's the fact that you're tired or whether it's you hurt your leg or you got knocked in the head, as a GM, I don't care. Like, you role play that however you like. Mechanically, it's just going to work. That's what I like. But I think this is a very fine thing. So before I head out, let's look at this encounter stew. This is from 2019 on the Goblin Punch blog. I will put a link to this. Not boogie like stew, encounter stew. Okay, let's zoom in on this one a bit. Encounter stew, first posted on July 29th, 2019. Tried to overhaul the random encounter system before, so have others, sometimes with very interesting results. Here's one more log for the fire. Brian, yes, it was a Disco Stew reference, exactly. You make an encounter check every 20 minutes, every 2 exploration turns. An exploration turn is the time it takes to investigate an average room. Your stew pot is a bowl in the center of the table with dice in it. Whenever you make an encounter check, you roll all the dice at the same time. You get light dice based on the size of your torch. Brighter light leads to fewer encounters. You get scout dice by being quiet and observant. They give you clues that help you get more ambushes. You get alert dice once you piss off the dungeon. Okay, so light dice. Okay, I see. So you're rolling a bunch of these different dice. So you're going to build up kind of like a whole big bowl of dice and then throw them all in. This is kind of, I've had similar ideas, but mine was around using a dice bag, because I've seen that in games like Clank. If you've ever played the Clank games, the original Clank, and I'm guessing in the different other ones too, when you're wondering if the dragon was going to do stuff, because the countdown and there's a dragon, and as you're making more noise and stuff, the dragon gets more. And it's been a long time since I played Clank, but basically the dragon, there's kind of a clock on the dungeon, if you will, that has to do with the dragon. And so as you're doing stuff, you're adding these tokens to the bag, and there's a certain amount of blank tokens. And when something finally makes that kind of clank or whatever, you get this thing, then you pull out tokens from the bag. And if you're lucky, you don't pull out any dragon tokens. If you do pull out dragon tokens, then the dragon starts to do stuff. And the idea here is it starts with basically mostly blank chits and maybe a couple of dragon chits. But then over time, you're continually adding more of, and it may be chits. The maybe chits for your player. I forget. Again, I don't remember exactly how it works. But essentially, the longer you're spending in the game, you start off with a very low chance of something being drawn, a lot of those blank chits, but then those blank chits are inevitably being drained, and you're adding more of the other chits so that it soon becomes likely that something's going to happen every time. So you get, so as the game goes on, each one of those clank things ends up being like more and more fraught, right? And so I've kind of wondered with that, like doing like a dice bag or a chit bag and having some different dice to do that. I think is another kind of cool thing to do, but I haven't figured out how to get the odds quite right, what I liked. But this is another way to do it. I kind of like it. I don't know if I would run this like this, but I think it's pretty cool to roll a bunch of dice. And it seems like there's I feel like as a table, there's be a fun element of when you roll those dice, kind of sifting through and seeing what it means. Might as well be a little bit slow. Karka says it could be emulated with shrinking tables. Yeah, you could. I think a better analog might be cards. If you're using cards, because your deck will deplete, and you could have different things. Like you could add in cards and take out cards. It's something that you could probably figure out a way to do with tables, but it's clunky. And it's one of those things that I think is, I love tables, but there are other ways to do things that have different distributions, right? And it's sometimes getting away from dice and looking at, well, I can get a different style of doing something by using different method is good. And I think like using cards or using different, like a bag, a draw. Obviously, if you're playing virtually, you'd have to figure out. I mean, a lot of things have card draws virtually, but I don't know if they do the thing with the deck management part. It's just something you do in person. But in person they're great because they're tactile. I remember when I played that DCC Wild West game, and then Gunfighter, when you're firing your guns, you drew from the deck, and it was like this, this tactical thing of drawing the deck and doing that. Or, tarot, if you want to use tarot, might have an interesting, just even if you're not doing much with the individual designs, they've got just seems very thematic in a way that rolling on a table is not. And it can be at the table and the players can do it. And like this, everybody can see this big bowl of dice with these different values in it, and you start to say like, oh, they've done this, and it really kind of sets it up. Could be a lot of fun. I mean, you're losing some speed, but it might be worth the fact that everyone's super into this moment. Oh yeah, Brian says, heck yeah, especially a tall dice tower to put your dice bag into. Yeah, it's kind of like when you see those Dark Tower board game setups, and this huge tower, and then all this stuff's chaos is coming out. Yeah, it would be a fun thing. I could see it at a con. And I think that's the thing is, if you're going to run a game at a con, I think these kind of props make it a lot of fun. They just add a little something when you're at the table. And, even if you're at a game store, or even for your home game, these tactile elements where you're not just rolling dice, but you're looking at cards, or you're a little bit of an interpretive sort of thing. And you're all sharing, where it's like rolling the bones and you're all trying to interpret what it means. Those things are really, really fun. Bluff equals a feint. Croco says, could probably make a combat system based on poker variant, try to guess what the opponent is going to do. Yeah, you could. I don't know. I'd have to get into I don't know, the odds of different things in poker. You'd probably want to figure out how to make it interesting. But yeah, I'm sure some games are already done, like something like playing blackjack or poker to do something. But even just for kind of random things, I just think having a deck or something else that depletes is really interesting, because it really changes the way you look at these events coming up, because the odds are changing. And you could do that with tables, because you can add modifiers and do things like that. But a deck, again, it's very visual. If you're at a table and you see that the deck is going, and you maybe want to try to read the deck, count cards. Like, oh my gosh, if say face cards are bad, but number cards are okay. You're looking at, oh, face cards are coming, or like, oh man, we haven't got any face cards for a while. It just has a really different vibe, and I do think it can be kind of additive to the game. You don't need it. You don't really need anything at the end of the day, but it's kind of fun. Well, all right, folks. I'm going to hit the road. I got to do some more work. I got to work on some stuff. Thanks for hanging out with me and going through some of the stuff in the blogosphere. Check out the RPG Day stuff. Follow one of the links. Go check it out. Go check out Crocco's excellent tables on the forums. I really think that these are good to do. And I know that maybe it even seems these 31-day ones feel daunting, but try them. Even if you don't do the whole thing, just try them. Yeah, I mean, I feel like we just started, and yeah, we've only got 8 or 9 more days left. So, and then you'll have this nice thing. I thought about maybe I'll typeset them into some kind of booklet. I don't know. We'll see. I think it's been good. I'm glad I've done it. I'm already looking forward to what is the next thing that I can participate in. Anyhow, have a great rest of your day, night, or whenever you end up watching or listening to this. Game on, everybody, and I'll talk to you later. Bye now.